morning. Welcome to Viewpoint. Mr. Nat King Cole's unforgettable theme song there. Good morning, Mrs. Busby. Welcome back into God's country here. Yeah. Well, no, that's not right. You were kind of in God's country up in Minnesota, weren't you?
Yes, I were, and I was glad. Went up to see my brother and sister-in-law and my aunt, and it was very nice. And I saw an old neighbor who I hadn't seen we grew up together, and it's been over 50 years since I've seen her.
Could you remember that?
50 years ago? Not so much. I can hardly remember what I had for breakfast. But it was a wonderful visit. We had a really nice time. Came home through the weather last night.
Well, as we all know, which both of you out there in the etherland, yeah. We always start Viewpoint with a kudo or two. And Judith and I were talking off air earlier, and I decided we'd just dispense with kudos for today and give the raspberries to all of our politicians for sitting there not doing a doggone thing. The state that we're in, which is pretty abysmal, nationwide, countrywide, citywide, pretty abysmal. And they just do a lot of talking and wringing the hands and pointing of fingers, and not much gets done. No. So instead of the kudos, we'll just give them the raspberries. And by the way, I will give a kudo to our little friend up here, the guy called Fiddler from up here at Armington. Yes. Dan Tackett. He's kind of been spot on this matter of the infrastructure in the city and so forth. So maybe we'll tip our hat to Dan. So we have a guest waiting on the telephone, Judith. So let's go right ahead and you introduce the gentleman.
Yes, I would be proud to do that. This morning we're going to be talking with Cliff Quine, and he lives in West Peoria. His grandson is the minister at my church, Adam Quine, and Cliff is the same age as Bill Gossett, and they were both in the Second World War. Mr. Quine was a Marine, and Bill, of course, was in the Air Force. And so this morning we're just going to have a little bit of chatting about the big war. You heard about that. It was in all the papers.
Yeah, that's one of the great lines of George Goebel. I've said this before on air, but George Goebel, the funny comedian, was asked by I can't remember the TV host. Johnny Carson. Thank you very much. And he would talk to him about his war experience. He says, "Oh yeah," he says, that was in the big war." He said, "You must have read about it. It was in all the papers." And I thought it was one of the great lines. Welcome aboard, Cliff. This old Air Corps guy is not qualified to use the term Semper Fi, but nonetheless, I'll give you a Semper Fi this morning. Nice to have you with us, sir.
Well, thank you.
Now, you were a Marine, and you were in several of the notable battles. Could you give us kind of a list, Cliff, of your activity?
This Judy I'm talking to?
Yes, it is.
Yeah. Well, there's one thing. I was a Marine and still am.
That a boy.
There you go. Once a Marine, always Marine. That's
what I've always read. Marine. You're never an ex.
There you go.
But, that's the way we look at it. But okay, what do you have?
Well, tell us about your experiences in the war.
Well,
you and Bill can swap.
You want to go from the beginning?
Sure.
Well, I was a young guy, 18 years old back in 1942, and anyhow, the war started, and I can remember when it started. And so I worked in a factory, and of course I was on my way to get in the car and everything, just like the kids are today. But anyhow, the war came on, and I signed up. I volunteered. And I left Peoria in November the 10th of 42, and went out to San Diego and done boot camp, and then I trained. We trained for tanks, and I was in the tank battalion throughout the war. And in the march up the Pacific, I had quite a trip. You like to hear about that?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. Go right ahead, Cliff. That's what we're doing.
Okay. Well, anyhow, we went out and we took us 30 days to get down to New Caledonia, and we went in there with our tanks. That was I'd never heard of the place or any of them other places I traveled, you know. But anyhow, we went down there. That was to go down and organize. And we was in as a battalion, and we weren't attached to any division yet. And but from there, we went down to New Zealand, stayed overnight, and we got this all in the Navy taking us, see. And we just over there one day and one night, and we got Liberty in Wellington. And we started back up the Pacific, and we joined the 2nd Marine Division on the water. And there was training in there and everything, but kind of skipping ahead a little bit, we hit Tarawa, November the 20th, 1943.
And that was the gym.
I'm sure you probably heard of Tarawa.
Oh my, yes, that was one.
And that was about an 8 or 9 day battle for 1 square mile of earth. That's how small the island was, but the story goes that they needed it for an airstrip, so it was pretty costly in lives, you know. So you still want to go?
Oh, sure.
Well, anyhow, from there, after we left Tarawa, we wasn't there after the battle was secured. We took off and we went to Hawaii. And then we was then known as Company A, 2nd Marine Corps Division. And then we went into Hawaii for more training and building up the division. And we was there for I'd say from January to June. And then we hit Saipan, June 15th, 44. That was it. And that was a battle, and they're all bloody, so it's no use going around with that, you know. But from there, then we went after we secured Saipan. Tinian was just about 2 miles off. You could see it from one to the other. So we took Tinian. So that was Tarawa, Saipan, and Tinian. And so we went back to Saipan then, and we built up again and trained some more. And then we hit Okinawa. And you familiar with that? We hit Okinawa, and we were there April the 1st, 1945. And we stayed in the harbor, our division. We were just there on standby, but they didn't need us right then, so they sent us back to Saipan, and they took the 8th Combat Regiment of the 2nd Division. That was what I was attached to. So we went back to Okinawa, and then we made the landing there. And of course, the battle was up in a far country in by that time. So we got in about the last week or two of battle on Okinawa. So anyhow, then we went back to Saipan, and then the atomic bomb came along, and that was all good news. And then we stayed there, and then next thing we thought we might get to go home, but we moved into Nagasaki for occupation. So consequently, we went in there for 2 or 3 months, and we left there December the 7th of 45. And I come back in the States, and I guess we landed about the 23rd of December. And then I was on the way of getting out, and it was all over, you know, the war. So anyhow, it took about 29 and a half months in the Pacific. So that's about the whole story, and come back and had to know my family, renew my...
That's a quick thumbnail voyage through the South Pacific. 29 months is a long time.
Yeah.
Incidentally, you mentioned Tinian, and if we hadn't been able to take Tinian, then we wouldn't have had that Air Force base from which the B-29 Enola Gay took off and did the bombing.
That was Tinian, yeah, he took off for them. That was so we was in pretty good spirits, but we was getting shot up doing it, you know.
Yeah.
Oh, my.
And I was lucky, and the good Lord kept me on for some reason. And I was turned into a tank driver, and then after the war, we just all attention was getting discharged, you know.
Oh,
Right.
yeah. Those we remember that very vividly. I know that why the good Lord took good care of you, Cliff. That's so you could have a grandson Adam to serve First Presbyterian Church here in Lincoln.
Amen, brother.
That's right.
You know, visiting, I was sitting here thinking of how you were kind of taking us a quick tour through the South Pacific. I don't know whether it just seems to me that the European War got the major publicity.
Yeah, now is this Bill I'm talking to, or?
This is Bill. That's correct.
Okay,
yeah.
you're the Air Force guy.
Yeah, right. We called it Air Corps in those days. By the way, it was Corps, not Corpse.
Well,
I recall.
Was you Navy or Army?
I'm sorry, sir.
Was you Navy, Air Corps, or Army?
Army. Army Air Corps.
Yeah, well, I got, I don't know, we was on the lines one day. I guess it was on Saipan or Tinian, but I had to leave my tank to go up the line for something, and the Navy plane come down strafing.
Oh.
You're familiar with that, I suppose.
Yeah.
Well, that's the Navy. That wasn't the Air Corps.
But anyhow, they missed it. They thought they shot the wrong place. I didn't get hit or nothing.
Well, there were a lot of. I'm sure that there were a lot of so-called friendly fire episodes that did take place. One of the major ones was when we bombed short at San Lo, and we killed some of our troops, including a three-star general, General Leslie McNair, and I was at the Normandy beachhead many years later. Been there twice, and it's a moving experience. In any event, I walked up to this one headstone, and it was General McNair. And I came home to Lincoln, Illinois, and talked to my good friend Harry Comstock. And I said, I just saw last week I saw General McNair's, and Harry was in. This is kind of a little side issue story, Judith and Jim.
Yeah.
Harry was had a terrible job. They identified remains and prepared them and so forth, and. He said, yeah, I picked him up. And I thought that was such a coincidence. One of my very best friends had that job, and he picked up General after he was killed.
Oh, boy.
It was one of the... so we had some, all over the country, the world, we had some friendly fire episodes like that. The European part of the war just seemed, in my mind, as I alluded to a minute ago, to get perhaps a little more coverage. But when you think of, and it was, of course, entirely different types of terrain for our infantry, and in effect, you were infantry, even though you were in the tank. That correlated to being in the infantry as far as the ground and the battles were concerned. So. When did you first learn to? Where did you first learn to drive a tank, Cliff?
Well, that was in boot camp. After boot camp, I don't know if you got time for a story or not, but
surely, Jim.
Boot camp was 7 weeks. That was back in '42, and after boot camp, we got privilege to go over and sign up for what we want, and go over and sign up. You know what you're going to want to be. So. I worked in a cafeteria, when I was 15, 16 years old. So I was going to go for a cook,
Yeah.
Seemed like a safe billet to me.
And the ones that didn't have anything to want, they was going to be tossed anywhere, but they could. Instead of standing in that long line, I got a chance to go back to the tent and scrap out for the whole day. And so I didn't make no choice. I didn't know what to get in. But I figured I was going to get in the infantry. Well, what happened? They formed the 1st Medium Tank Corps Battalion, and I got put in that. Now that was probably in December, January, the year there. And we trained 6 months with the Sherman tanks, and then we shipped out in July of '43. So that was the history of my tank,
Yeah, you mentioned being in boot camp in the Marines. I would offer to say that perhaps my 6 weeks in basic training was somewhat different. The government took over a bunch of hotels down in Miami Beach, to be exact, for basic training. And I was shipped out of Fort Sheridan down to Miami, and got there at 3 in the morning, had no idea where we were going, got off the train. It was balmy and warm and everything. We had no idea where we were. And they put us in some vehicles and transported us to a hotel. And that was my quarters for the first 6 weeks in the Air Corps. And then I got shipped off to Chicago for radio training, and we lived in a hotel up there. And it wasn't until I'd been in the Air Corps I guess about 3 months, and I finally got sent to a real Army camp, and I found the difference there. So,
yeah, you would, I bet.
So our experiences at basic training and boot camp were significantly different. Oh, and by the way, speaking of boot camp, we all just saw we had 2 gals that went through the Ranger training course. Boy, they got to be some tough ladies. West Point graduates, and boy, there would be a kudo if I ever saw one. 2 gals that go through that. That is tough going. And by last night, I just happened to watch a PBS thing on SEAL training. That was a fascinating program to watch. So, what have you done now since you? What did you come back to in civilian life, Cliff?
Well, I worked at Herschel Manufacturing for when I started there in about 41. I worked there a year and a half. And in the factory there, it was a farm implement manufacturer. And when I left, the GI Bill, you get your job back if and when you're lucky enough to get back, in which I was. So I went back into the factory. Well, in January, I guess that was for 46 then, and I went in there and then just stuck with the factory work, and well, I was about 50 years old, and they sold out to Caterpillar, and then I had 33 years in there. I got my seniority and everything, and I worked that out, but for the main thing, I got back home, and then I got married in January in 46, and well, you know the story. You gotta put meat on the table. And you concentrate on your job, So I went in and wound up at Caterpillar. I was lucky, and I got another 10 years in there. Well, then I retired in, I think it was 85, and from there, now I'm just rolling along like Old Man River.
Well, we're going to roll around here very quickly. We're going to roll ourselves into a commercial. If you'll stand by, Cliff, we'll be right back on the air in just a few minutes.
Bill, I got to sign off. I just want to tell you, you sure you're 91?
Yeah. I'm rolling up to 92 very quickly here.
I got that coming up in January,
Oh, well, you're just a kid.
Well, hang on then.
You just stand by just a couple minutes. We're going to be back. Don't hang up.
Yeah, okay.
All right. Right, back live in the studios here at station WLCN, high on the top of Lazy Row.
Right.
And Jim Ash's old hometown, Atlanta, Illinois. Jim's a busy guy here in the studio, Cliff. He does everything. Well, he even cleans the restroom. He does it all, from latrine to executive position. Cliff, did you mention being on EWO during your tour in the South Pacific?
No, we missed. We had about 5 or 6 Marine divisions, and they leapfrogged them, in taking what you're going to hit. But we missed EWO, which we were thankful for, But no, it wasn't. I never was on EWO.
Well, each and every island out there that they took piece by piece was it was a battle and difficult in and of itself. So they all ranged as far as rating of battles are concerned. How did you offload those tanks off the ships?
Well, we had LSDs.
Right.
We travel on. That's our landing ship dry dock, and then we've had the LST, and then the LSM, and that's the way we made 5 landings, and I was on them LS SD, that's the landing ship dry dock. It was interesting. And they had a well deck. They'd flood the well deck and then float out 18 tanks in a LCM. It was a magnificent way, or somebody who had some brains, to put that in action, But that's how they trained. We trained our tanks, and then and Navy would take us into the shore, drop the ramp, and then we'd roll off into the water. Saying if he's lucky, you wouldn't hit a hole.
Yeah.
Some of we hit.
Yeah, I remember very vividly, and of course, on June 6th, that they were landing some of those craft, and they didn't get to more than 10 feet off the boat, and down they went.
Yeah,
you were a tank driver, Cliff?
Well, at that time, I was assistant driver when we hit the beach the first time. But I was assistant driver and bow gunner, and we got off at. We had about 400 yards to go to hit the beach, but the ones further up the end, why there were several of them drowned out,
Oh, yeah.
Got in the shell holes. But that's how we landed them.
The tanks that were employed on island landings, they were, normally we think of a tank of being a pretty big piece of equipment like the Sherman tank. And
that's what we had,
Shermans, and those were big then to be bring them ashore from boats on that terrain.
Yeah.
How did the treads work on that sand terrain?
Well, it worked okay. They never had no sticking. Well, we had one, I think, stuck out on the shore, out of the sand. Of course, if you're spinning the tanks, the tracks, you're going to dig in. But no, that's. By the way, that's 33 tons of steel.
33.
One tank,
Oh boy.
With a lot of equipment. And now the obvious question would be, didn't it get hot in there? And of course, I'm sure it got very hot.
We was out in the Pacific there, and it was a lot different than over in Europe. And we even Tara, that was right about on the equator. So the history we got from it, So no, we had T-shirts. We wasn't freezing or nothing, but in the mornings, when we was building up again, it got kind of chilly,
How many men were on each of the tanks?
In a tank? 5.
5 men per tank.
Would you identify the positions on those folks who were on those tanks, Cliff?
Well, you got the driver, and then the assistant driver, and bow gunner, which I was there. And you got a gunner, and a loader, and a tank commander. And that's 5 guys.
And they trained together as, excuse me, Judith.
As an 18-year-old kid, I should think you'd have been petrified.
Well, I put everything behind me, thinking back, and there was no looking forward. You don't expect to come. You're in there for do or die. You got to figure that. That's a Marine Corps standard.
Well,
and it sounds rugged or bad, but you ain't going to walk back from that distance, So you just concentrate on going forward, and I was one of the lucky ones, and that's how you figure it out,
Did you ever...
By the way, I left my family in 42, my mother and that, and I didn't hear or see nothing of them until 1946.
Oh boy!
Think of that.
I wasn't. There were 16 million of us out there.
Right. They talk about PTSD now. Do you ever have any flashbacks in the night when you're asleep and dream about one of these awful landings?
No, I don't. I never have been bothered with that. I just, like I say, I just had one thing on mind, and I know it was war, so we did what we had to do,
Yeah, take one day at a time.
Yeah, but
I think of those folks who were in the Air Corps who were flying missions a lot, and they take off, and there's no way of knowing whether they're going to be back or not.
Absolutely.
And that went on day after day after day.
Yeah.
On both sides of the country, Europe and South Pacific. Is there any particular incident that has stayed with you in your memory bank, Cliff?
Well, yeah, there is. Well, there's a lot of. But my first one, I'll tell you about that. We hit Tarawa, and first thing I saw out of the periscope, you're buttoned up, and all you see is out of your periscope. I saw two young Marines on the sand with their faces in the sand that got killed, in the landing. Mm-hmm. And that is left. I don't care. I'm not wishing it. I remember it vaguely, but it don't bother me. And then what my statement was, this is war,
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah,
that was it.
You deal with it as each individual dealt with it in their own way. Some in magnificent ways, some not so magnificent, by the by.
That's right.
It's just the way it was.
Yeah. Well, I took some shots and hits too.
Mm-hmm.
I got on Tarawa. I was on two tanks. We got knocked out by landmines, or not landmines, magnetic mines.
Magnetic. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then we took a couple hits on Tinian. I made driver on Tinian later on,
mm-hmm.
and I went up on rank as corporal, and that was my highest rate.
Well, you were just as important as a guy who had 3 stars on his shoulder.
Hey, we all were.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Did you form any lasting friendships that have lasted down? Of course, you and I are getting into the point where the sunset's just too far away. Have you formed lasting friendships down through the years, Cliff?
Oh yeah, my captain, he's in Texas. I talk to him occasionally, and he was a rough and tumble guy, but he was just doing his job. So I maintained a friendship with him, mm-hmm. and I got one up in Michigan. But about everything. Now when we left Peoria, there were 300 of us. Well, and I was with, we got some back, and those guys are all gone.
Yeah.
Now they died, throughout the years. But I do have a lot of memories of the fellows that I was with.
Yeah, those memories stay with you, even though we're now pretty long on the tooth and very gray or white or no hair at all. Cliff, have you been on the honor flight yet, sir?
Oh, yeah, I made that flight.
Good, I'm glad to know that.
2011, my son took me down, mm-hmm. and that was wonderful.
Yes,
and I'll tell you a little story.
Mm-hmm.
There was a reporter around one place we was at, and he come over for some reason or other and interviewed me, see. And he says, one of the questions, he says, do you consider yourself a hero? And I thought, and I said, no. I said, we had a job to do, and we did it. Mm-hmm. Well, afterwards, I got to thinking, I could have said that no, because there were 16 million of us that was in the armed forces at that time, and they all were heroes,
Yeah, in our own way. Each of us did the job that we were assigned to do, and for so many of us, it was the luck of the draw.
Yeah.
For instance, in my particular case, I had some pretty doggone good typing skills because I'd had a very good typing teacher in high school, and I can tell you her name today.
Yeah.
And she's long gone. And as a result of that, I got assigned to radio teletype school in Chanute Field, and apparently I was pretty decent at it, and they kept me there as an instructor. And that wasn't fine for a while, and I thought I had a really lucky draw because I'd gone to the University of Illinois, and so it was very, very close there, and I could go in there on weekends and so forth. And I was dumb enough to keep pestering them I wanted to get overseas. And they finally took me at my word and sent me overseas. And I wondered what in the world I'd done.
Well, I done the same thing when I left Peoria in 42. I woke up around Canada somewhere on a train, and I was on the upper berth, and I woke up the next day after I left, rolled up the shade, and I thought, what have I done? Gee, 1946, January the 11th, I got back.
Well, you and I put in about the same time in our military careers.
We're both 90. We got about the same background as far as time,
Yeah, I spent 3 years from let's see, I went in 43, January 43, and came out in February of 46.
Yeah,
so that's about the same time there.
Well, it's about the same time, yeah.
Now, did you come home to a girlfriend?
Oh yeah, I met a girl in 41, and we went together, and then I left for the war, and of course everything wasn't peaceful. We kind of had a little scrap there. And anyhow, I got back in 46, and then we got married in the latter part of January.
You know, Cliff?
Go ahead, Judith, please.
With both you and Bill having been anxious to actually get into the battles, how did you feel during the awful Vietnam War when some of the young people were leaving and going to Canada so they wouldn't have to go to war? What did that do to you?
Well, it would give me a kind of a sick to the stomach deal, onto it. And to add more fuel to the fires when they got paroled after the war was over, I felt bad about it.
We were betrayed.
I didn't approve of it,
I know a politician that went to Canada. He became a very big politician before it was all said and done.
Did what?
His wife's thinking about running now.
Yeah, that's right.
How'd you find your chow?
How did I find it?
Yeah.
Well, I didn't argue with it.
We were hungry. That's a very succinct answer. That's a good answer, Cliff. And we were hungry.
No, I never argued with it. No.
Were you able to keep track at all? Did you hear anything about what was happening in the European theater?
No, not so much. We were all Pacific, and we had a mail call, and that was always looked forward to, and we had our path to take, and we took it, But we didn't we didn't get no news about it. Actually, we did. We was kind of barren out there. We never got news on it,
Do you remember what you were doing at the time that you heard that they dropped the little boy and the big boy?
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm.
What were you doing?
Well, we was on Saipan. The war was pretty handy coming to. We was pretty well into it, on the winning side of it, and I was at a outdoor movie over on Saipan. That was one of the times we got back to rebuild, and it was announced then that the first atomic bomb was dropped, and we felt pretty happy, And then the second, and then that boosted our morale too there. But we thought we was going to go right home, but it was in December when we went to Nagasaki, and we stayed there for 2 or 3 months. So,
Cliff, did the USO ever catch up with your units at some point in time in your career in the South Pacific?
Yeah, it did, but I never did attend any. I don't know, for some reason I couldn't get out. We dealt with a tent camp, and I never got to go to any of them.
Well,
we didn't have that many anyway,
Well, those folks, I took my hat off to them too. They ventured into places that weren't very safe to put shows on for our boys. Yeah,
they did. They done a good job, USO. And well, in fact, I only went to one of them down in Oceanside. When we was in boot camp and tank training, And it was nice, but I didn't get involved with it too much.
Where were you on December 7th, 1941, Mr. Quine?
Well, I was at home, and I got up and it was on a Sunday morning. And I had a late night on a Saturday. And
you want to tell me about that?
Yeah.
So you were at home.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
And did you at that point in time? Did you envision that? Well, I better get going and enlist.
No, I did. I kept on in my job, and I had my old 1935 Ford. Everything was good for 8 or 10 months, and then they couldn't get tires. You're going to ration this and ration that, and the car insurance came up, and so I just sold the car to my brother-in-law and went and joined up.
What do you think about having an all-volunteer Army now? There's nobody drafted anymore.
Nobody what?
Nobody's drafted anymore. It's all volunteer. What do you think of that?
Volunteering?
Of having an all-volunteer Army.
Well, I think it's wonderful if you get some if you can stay strong, you know.
Well, there's a problem. We have politicians who think they know more than our generals.
Yeah,
and
that's right. Yeah.
That's another subject for a long discussion on another day.
Yeah.
You take your hat off to these folks who are in the military today, and very candidly, for some, it's a way of getting out of a tough life.
Yeah.
And there's nothing wrong with that. But there are some of our enlistees looking at it as a haven to get off of some really tough existence. So you take your hat off to them. Of course, now we have ladies who are serving very capably and very honorably. All we had in those days was the BAMs. And you know what a BAM is, don't you, Jim Ash?
Yeah.
That was a Lady Marine.
Yeah,
it was a broad Marine.
Your relation to the Marine Corps.
Yeah,
right.
And we had our wax and our waves and so forth.
Yeah.
And and of course the object at that time was they would take the place of some guy so he could go into more active service.
That made him happy, I'll bet, whoever.
Yeah, exactly so. But those ladies served honorably in their day. Now, today's times, gosh, we have honored graduates from West Point, their Naval Academy.
Yeah.
And I presume the Coast Guard. Well, thank goodness we have maintained our military colleges and so forth. We have a lot of apologists out there who don't do us much good at all with their attitude about the military, and that bothers people like you and I. Go ahead, Judith K.
I was wondering, Cliff, how you feel about the business of the armed services having been so politicized and the cutbacks that they're doing. Do you think that's dangerous to our country?
Oh, sure it is. You heard so much about the sleeping giants, and what that alluded to the United States, you know. I don't know if you ever heard that phrase or not, but we got caught with Pearl Harbor. We got caught by 911, and then the sleeping giant, he still knows how to take a nap, you know. And that's I think they're doing wrong when they cut down on the armed forces and discredit the military, you know. So that's the way I feel on that.
That sounds like a good stand to me.
One quick question here before we wrap it up, sir.
Yeah.
When you went on the honor flight, was there one particular memorial that stood out in your mind more than others? Each and every one of them were outstanding in their own right, but I had one that stuck out with me. Did that happen with you, sir?
You mean with one of the exhibitions?
Yes, one of the memorials out there.
Yeah.
Is there any
well, the memorials was all okay, but what impressed me, I got to go by the Arlington Cemetery I'd heard so much about.
You bet. Yeah.
And it was amazing how they keep that up, and I don't know how many, I've forgotten now how many is buried out there. But that's one thing to say, I was hung up on, yeah.
Yeah, that's a definitive, certainly about that one. And those of us who've been privileged to visit some of the others, Punch Bowl, I've been over to Hawaii, and I've seen the cemeteries in Europe, several of them, and it's an inspirational thing to stand there and kind of look around those fields and reflect upon what it took to get there. Cliff, we really appreciated your time with us this morning. It's been an enjoyable visit. Do you have any comments before we wrap this up, sir?
Yeah, one comment, Bill. I want you to be honest with me, okay?
Yeah.
Where's your spring of youth? Or did you found the string of youth there?
Well, I'll not be facetious with you. God's been very good to me, and for which I'm eternally grateful.
Sign off with that.
Yeah,
the bottom line is that's how I endured and went on. Being a young kid, I didn't have too much Christian training, but I knew, and I put my trust in God for the whole thing, and that's what carried me through it.
Well, on that's a very good note to end. We appreciate your time with us, sir. Get Lincoln, have Adam get in touch with us, and we'll have a coffee or a beer, if you please.
Well, beer, I'll take the coffee. I was a beer drinker about 15, 20 years ago.
You know, I always close, sir, with a quote that hopefully is germane to the subject matter of the day. And our visit with you certainly sums this up very nicely. And it says, damn the wars. Bless the soldier.
Yes.
Thank you very much, sir.
Well, it's very nice of both of you and Judy.
Thank you.
Look forward to seeing you in Lincoln.
And have a good day.
You
Bye-bye,
too.
sir.
You too.